Prologue, The Last Quiet Morning, February 24th, 2022. The history of the 21st century pivoted on a single freezing Thursday morning. At 4:50 a.m., the streets of Kyiv were silent. It was a modern European capital. Coffee shops were ready to open, children's backpacks were packed for school, and the Dnieper River flowed quietly through the city's heart. Then, the sky tore open. Cruise missiles slammed into apartment blocks, airports, and command centers. From the north, south, and east, over 190,000 Russian troops poured across the borders. In Moscow, President Vladimir Putin appeared on television announcing a special military operation. His demeanor was cold, his justification rooted in a grievance that stretched back decades. He believed Ukraine was a fiction, a wayward province that needed to be brought back into the fold. He believed Kyiv would fall within 72 hours. The world watched in paralyzed horror. Intelligence agencies in Washington and London predicted a massacre. They offered the Ukrainian president a route to escape. But as the first Russian tanks rolled past the Chernobyl exclusion zone, churning up radioactive dust and heading straight for the capital, something unexpected happened. Ukraine did not run. It turned to fight. Chapter 1. The Ghost of Empires, The Origins, 1991 to 2014. To understand the fire, we must look at the spark. The conflict did not begin in 2022. It began in the rubble of the Berlin Wall. When the Soviet Union collapsed in 1991, Ukraine declared independence. For Russia, this was an amputation. Ukraine wasn't just a neighbor, it was the industrial heartland of the USSR and the cultural cradle of the Slavic peoples. Without Ukraine, Russia was a country. With Ukraine, Russia was an empire. For 2 decades, an uneasy truce held. Ukraine oscillated between East and West, corrupt but peaceful. But in 2013, the Ukrainian people made a choice. When their pro-Russian president, Viktor Yanukovych, abruptly abandoned a trade deal with the European Union under pressure from Moscow, students flooded Kyiv's central square, the Maidan. The revolution of dignity. What started as a protest became a revolution. Snipers fired on civilians. Over 100 people died. Yanukovych fled to Russia. The Ukrainian people had chosen the West. Vladimir Putin saw this not as a democratic movement, but as a CIA-backed coup. In retaliation, he struck quickly. In 2014, Little Green Men, Russian soldiers without insignias, seized the Crimean Peninsula. Shortly after, Russian-backed separatists ignited a war in the Donbass region of eastern Ukraine. For 8 years, the world largely ignored the simmering conflict in the east. It became a frozen conflict of trenches and snipers. But in the Kremlin, plans were being drawn. Putin spent those 8 years modernizing his military and building a war chest, convinced that the West was weak, divided, and unwilling to fight for Ukraine. He was about to make the greatest miscalculation of his life. Chapter 2. The Battle for Kyiv. The Failure of the Blitzkrieg. February to March 2022. The Russian plan was a classic blitzkrieg or lightning war. They intended to seize the Hostomel airport just outside of Kyiv, fly in thousands of elite paratroopers, storm the presidential palace, and install a puppet regime. The Battle of Hostomel. It was here, on the tarmac of Hostomel, that the war was decided. Russian VDP elite airborne troops landed in helicopters, expecting light resistance. Instead, they were met by the fierce fire of the Ukrainian National Guard. The Mriya, the world's largest airplane, parked at the airport, was destroyed in the crossfire, a symbol of the carnage. The Ukrainians shelled the runway, making it impossible for heavy Russian transport planes to land. The elite Russian vanguard was isolated and decimated. Meanwhile, inside the government quarter, President Volodymyr Zelensky was filming himself on a smartphone. Unshaven, wearing an olive green t-shirt, he looked into the camera. The president is here. We are all here. When the US offered to evacuate him, his response became legendary. I need ammunition, not a ride. This defiance electrified the nation. Ordinary citizens confused Russian convoys by changing road signs. Grandmothers made Molotov cocktails in parks. Without air superiority and facing unexpected anti-tank weapons, javelins and NLAWs provided by the West, the massive 40-mile Russian convoy heading to Kyiv stalled. They ran out of fuel. They ran out of food. They became sitting ducks for Ukrainian ambush teams. Chapter 3. The Face of Evil. Bucha and Mariupol. Spring 2022. As the Russians withdrew from the north, the euphoria of victory was replaced by the horror of discovery. Ukrainian troops entered the suburb of Bucha, a quiet town of commuters. What they found broke the world's heart. Bodies of civilians littered the streets. Men with hands tied behind their backs were found in basements. Mass graves were uncovered near the church. It became clear that this was not just a war for territory, it was a war of extermination. The narrative shifted in the West. It was no longer a territorial dispute, it was a moral crusade. The Siege of Mariupol. While the north was liberated, the south was burning. The port city of Mariupol was encircled. For nearly 3 months, the city was pulverized. The drama centered on the Azovstal steel plant, a massive Soviet-era industrial complex with a nuclear-proof bunker system beneath it. A few thousand Ukrainian defenders, including the controversial Azov Regiment and Marines, held out against 20,000 Russian troops. They were starved, bombed with bunker busters, and denied medicine. They broadcasted videos from the dark depths of the plant, singing the national anthem as they tended to the wounded. Mariupol eventually fell, reduced to a skeleton of concrete and ash, but the defenders bought Ukraine precious time to fortify the rest of the country. Chapter 4. The HIMARS Summer and the Kharkiv Thunder. Summer to autumn 2022. By summer, the war had changed. Russia shifted tactics to a slow, grinding artillery war in the east. They were firing 60,000 shells a day, inching forward by leveling everything in their path. Ukraine was outgunned. Then, the game changers arrived. The United States sent HIMARS, high-mobility artillery rocket systems. These precision-guided rockets allowed Ukraine to strike deep behind enemy lines, destroying Russian ammo depots and command centers with surgical accuracy. The Russian advance halted as their logistics crumbled. The Kharkiv counteroffensive. September 2022. In September, Ukraine pulled off a masterstroke of deception. They telegraphed a massive attack in the south, Kherson. Russia moved its best troops there to defend. Suddenly, Ukrainian tanks punched through the thin Russian lines in the northeast, Kharkiv. It was a rout. Russian soldiers fled, leaving behind tanks, meals half-eaten, and washing machines they intended to loot. In days, Ukraine liberated more territory than Russia had captured in 5 months. The liberation of Kherson. November 2022. 2 months later, facing cut-off supply lines, Russia abandoned Kherson, the only regional capital they had managed to capture. Chapter 5. The Meat Grinder, Bakhmut. Winter 2022, Spring 2023. As the first anniversary of the war approached, the conflict descended into hell. The focal point was a small salt mining city called Bakhmut. It held little strategic value, but immense symbolic weight. Russia, desperate for a victory, unleashed the Wagner Group, a private mercenary army led by Yevgeny Prigozhin. Prigozhin recruited prisoners from Russian jails, promising them freedom if they survived 6 months. He used them in human wave attacks. Wave after wave of poorly trained men were sent running across open fields into Ukrainian machine gun fire simply to reveal Ukrainian positions for artillery. The battle for Bakhmut became the bloodiest infantry battle since World War II. It was a meat grinder. The city was erased from the map. Ukraine eventually lost the city, but the cost to Russia was staggering. Tens of thousands dead for a few kilometers of rubble. Chapter 6. Drones, 2023 to 2024. In the summer of 2023, Ukraine launched a highly anticipated counteroffensive armed with Western tanks, Leopards and Challengers. But Russia had learned from its mistakes. They had built the Surovikin Line, hundreds of miles of dragon's teeth, trenches, and the densest minefields in history. The Ukrainian offensive crashed against these defenses. There was no breakthrough. The war froze. The drone revolution. As the front lines stagnated, the war moved to the skies. It became the world's first drone war. FPV drones, cheap $500 hobby drones strapped with explosives, were used to destroy $3 million tanks. Sea drones, a country with virtually no navy, used remote-controlled jet skis, or sea babies, to hunt the Russian Black Sea Fleet, sinking the flagship Moscow and forcing the Russian Navy to retreat from Crimea. The war had transformed. Soldiers could no longer hide. Every movement was watched by a drone. Chapter 7. The Current Reality. 2024 to present. As we look at the situation today, the narrative has shifted from sprint to marathon. The Russian strategy. Putin is betting on time. He believes the West, the USA and Europe, will get bored, distracted by elections, we're tired of the economic cost. Russia has transitioned to total war economy, factories running 24/7 to produce shells. They have forged alliances with Iran for Shahed drones and North Korea for artillery shells, creating an axis of autocracy. The Ukrainian reality. Ukraine is bleeding. The enthusiasm of 2022 has been replaced with grim determination. They face a shortage of manpower. The soldiers fighting today are largely the same ones who signed up 3 years ago, exhausted and traumatized. However, Ukraine has brought the war home to Russia. Ukrainian long-range drones now strike oil refineries deep inside Russia, crippling their economy. In a shocking twist in August 2024, Ukrainian troops even launched an incursion into the Kursk region of Russia, seizing Russian territory for the first time since World War II, proving that the Russian bear is not invincible. The Western dilemma. The war is now a proxy battle for the global order. If Russia wins, the message to China and other dictators is clear. Borders can be redrawn by force. The USA and Europe continue to supply aid, but political gridlock often delays critical ammunition. Conclusion: the shadow of the future. Why does this war matter to a viewer in Ohio, Texas, or California? Because the fields of Ukraine are deciding the future of the 21st century. It is a story of David versus Goliath in the age of AI. It showed us that tanks are vulnerable to toys, that propaganda can't hide the truth in the age of social media, and that the will of a free people is a weapon more powerful than a nuclear arsenal. The war is not over. The front lines are jagged scars across the map. Millions of Ukrainians are refugees. The rebuilding will take generations. But one thing is certain: Vladimir Putin went to war to prove that Ukraine did not exist. Instead, he forged the Ukrainian nation in fire. Before 2022, the world confused Ukraine with Russia. Today, the blue and yellow flag is a global symbol of resistance. The bear cast a long shadow, but the trident remains unbroken.